The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
And now it's time for a Cannabis Catch-Up brought to you by Boveda Inc.
Lance Lambert joins us. How are you, friend?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I was out your way. I know you're from Southern Cal, so I was out in Los Angeles for 4 or 5 days. You weren't there. And then I hopped over to Las Vegas. And I don't even think I told people this yet, Bilal. But while I was in Las Vegas, Lance and Bilal, there was, believe it or not, and if I had a drum roll, I would play one. There was literally an inch of snow on the ground. We were an inch. It accumulated. Unbelievable. What is going on with this world, dude? Well, you guys are getting crazy weather in that part of the world.
Yeah, that's and it's funny you mentioned. I know exactly what day you're there because my brother lives out in Vegas, and he's like, "Hey, there's a blizzard coming in." And I'm like, "What? It hasn't snowed there since the early 2000s." So, yeah, climate change, right? We even have it in the forecast here in, of all places, Southern California, just 20 minutes from the ocean. So it's definitely been a little crazy, but I do apologize for not being in L.A. I think literally the day that you came out here, I was on my way to Boston for the NCIA Seed to Sale show. So apologies we weren't able to catch up in beautiful Southern California.
What's legalization like in Massachusetts right now, Lance?
It's interesting. So, the New England state definitely is doing well. I'd say that they are leading the path in the Northeast right now. You've probably heard a lot of talk around New Jersey, and things are moving forward there. New York is finally getting their stuff together. You also have Philadelphia and Vermont, amongst other states. But it seems like Massachusetts is really kind of leading the path in the Northeast as far as adult use or recreational goes. So it's going well there. We got to meet several producers and dispensaries, and it's just a little different style there. I'd say, culture and craft is what the industry revolves around on the west side of the U.S. On the east side, it's definitely a lot more buttoned up in business, which is good too, just a little different from what I'm accustomed to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to sort of lead to now. And I was just reading an article about this. If ma and pa shops can sort of survive what's going on through legalization, and, I think we're going to see it sooner rather than later in the United States. And when you're at trade shows like that, I guess you could do, a mix of both. What are your thoughts? Can ma and pa shops survive in this industry? And an industry, really, quite frankly, that they've probably been around for decades. It just wasn't legal, and also have a complete passion for.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Todd. And that's one thing that does differ from one side of the country to the other, right? So, the fact that cannabis was legalized technically all the way back to 1990 with Prop P here in California, you're right. There are a lot of mom and pops, and they've respected the fact that those were the ones that started it all. But then you even have some of those that did start out a little bit smaller that have gone mainstream, like Harborside. That's my friend Steve D'Angelo's operation up in Oakland, very well known, and they've been hugely successful. I think it kind of depends where you are. So on the East Coast, we are seeing kind of the whole compassion care and groups like that. That are keeping that small organization, but likewise you're seeing some of these larger, almost franchise. I mean, there's a group that we're friends with up in Oregon, and I think all in all they have almost a few dozen dispensaries under their umbrella, albeit under different names. But it is nice to see markets like your own, like Ontario, to hear of Toronto when they put out the, essentially the lotto for dispensaries in specifically Toronto, the fact that so many of them were private or smaller LLCs versus large incorporated entities, I think that really speaks volumes about the advocates and and even to a certain extent, some of those, they're a little more extreme back in the illegal days, making sure that, again, that small business survives in this space.
One of the conversations going on in the States that I keep hearing as well is, should Congress open up banks to the marijuana industry? And that's one of the been things that's sort of set it back a little bit within U.S., which is very different than Canada. We're getting loans from banks, and it's sort of, there's still a few that aren't quite fully into it, but there have definitely been a couple of cases with Scotiabank and TD. Do you think that's something that will slowly happen and then help drive more business to the United States in the cannabis industry, which, believe it or not, Canada kind of is the leader of?
Yeah, it's 100%. It's so interesting. That's one thing I've been preaching for the last few years. I'm like, keep an eye on Canada and look and see what happened. And you guys have been doing it right. Not, granted, not perfect. I mean, you've had challenges like other areas of legalization. Take, for example, California and Colorado. There's hiccups along the way, but the fact that Canada says we're in it to win it, we're in it 100%. We want to make sure this is a legal, safe market. We want to take it away from the black market. We want to take it away from illicit and underground scenes. A lot of props to Canada. The U.S., unfortunately, it is a bit fragmented. We have different licenses and different laws from state to state. The one thing I think that will change exponentially in an immediate fashion is the banking, though, compared to, say, federal legalization that I still would have to guess would be at least 2 to 3 years off. The big state that's leading that path is California. Keeping in mind, we've talked about this, but with a state that has almost 40 million people in it, substantially larger than the next largest population state, which is New York, followed by Texas, you have all types of folks from Congress to government and even Treasury that are all in support of legalization on the banking side, because it does create a challenge. And not just a challenge for those that touch the plant, as we say, but for ancillary companies as well, because they are coming in contact with this cash from what is, of course, constitutionally illegal in the state, but not at a federal level. So it has to change. It can't be forced to continue to be a cash only, because that just creates, quite honestly, a pretty unsecure situation at all levels, from the front line all the way to wherever that money's being buried or stored.
It's interesting you mentioned briefly, Lance Lambert, by the way, joins us from bovedainc.com, but you mentioned about how sort of we are really still figuring out this rollout right here in Canada, and of course everyone in the rest of the world sort of watching it. One of the things I did also read just recently was there's sort of like this big now debate going on when Health Canada, and apparently it's happening on February 20th, will end the sort of consultation they've been doing with all the proposed regulations for cannabis edibles. And that's like a big thing now. So how are we going to actually roll out cannabis in edibles? And I guess one of the main things is they're asking for more than 10 milligrams of the THC within edible products to sell legally. And I guess that's another thing that the cannabis industry is very passionate of. If they've done it one way, they know how it affects them, the amount it can affect them, and how to take the stuff responsibly. Do you think that's a fair ask of the cannabis community to get a minimum of 10 milligrams of THC in edibles?
Yeah, that has become the standard. Another good one, Todd. So 10 milligram was what was deemed a single dose in the state of Colorado, the state of Washington, and even here in the state of California. A majority of states have since adopted that same standard of 10 milligram per dose, with a cap dosage of 10 per package. So meaning you could buy a candy bar still that has 100 milligrams and is broken down into 10 portions. The one exception to that was Oregon, which Oregon, as much as California gets credit for the culture and even the strains and a lot of the genetics coming out of California, Oregon, I'd say, is one of the most passionate states out there. And so they went ahead and said 15 milligrams was the standard. Just my personal experience, both myself and with friends, a lot of us argue about even 10 milligrams is a bit much. I mean, unfortunately, we hate to compare this industry to alcohol, but it's tough not to, right? Because that's another industry that was in prohibition. That's another industry that had to set standards post-prohibition. And 10 milligrams, while I wouldn't compare it to a shot of White Lightning or vodka, it's definitely a bit more potent than a bottle of beer or a glass of wine. So 10 milligrams, I think, is very reasonable. I would almost venture to say even 5 milligrams is a single dose, because quite honestly, when my friends are getting into it, I tell them to, it's a campaign we started in Colorado. It's a campaign Canada has adopted, but start slow, go low. So go with a low dose, start with 2.5 or 5 milligrams, give it 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and see how you feel. Because everyone's body and chemistry is different, especially with edibles, because, again, similar to alcohol, it's going through your kidney, your liver, it's being processed through your GI, and the absorption rate is substantially different than, say, inhalation or even a topical or tincture.
But again, I guess, Lance, that one of these things the government really wants to regulate it is so people won't get, too messed up, really, is what they're looking out for the people's best interest, I would imagine. But they have to understand that with more education, people can then probably, I would assume, choose their dose.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree 100%. It all comes down to education. That's how our company leads. We aren't sales-centric. We're a marketing-centric company, and that's deliberate because we wanted to lead with education, and education comes from, your marketing team. So that's what we've always been passionate about. But a lot of friends in the industry, again, those that are actually producing or touching the plant, they're the same way. They're all about education, from the Good Chemistry group out in Colorado to, again, Harborside or Palm Springs Safe Access out here in California. These guys all have this undertone of education to the consumer and helping them understand what is the best match for them. Because, again, it's hard to just kind of blanket it over and go, hey, this is perfect for everybody. Most commonly, I just had a friend I grew up with in school, reached out and said, quite honestly, Lance, pot's always give me paranoia. And I'm like, well, that's like saying, alcohol is always giving you a hangover. More likely, there's a specific alcohol, say tequila or vodka versus wine or beer, that gives you a hangover. So you have to look and see what your needs are and then find the appropriate dosage and the appropriate strain or source in order to remedy that issue. And so it was another, great educational conversation. I know you have the same with your circle of friends as well. We've talked about before. So just helping that consumer understand what they're getting into.
Lance Lambert's with us from bovedainc.com. There was an interesting story today, came out or yesterday. Billy Ray Cyrus, famous old country singer and dude in the industry with his daughter Miley Cyrus. He posted a picture of his wife Tish, and there were mountains of marijuana leaves. But bags full, just absolute bags full, just stashed in like a regular closet. And I guess it sort of sparked an online debate, which was very interesting and stuff we've talked about. White privilege, meaning look what's going on with like these rich white dudes. Now it's okay to post this much marijuana, but back in the day, and this is all proven by statistics, there were a lot of African-American arrests and an overwhelming number of and compared to the rest of sort of society out there for simple possession of stuff. And now here we are, fast forward 15, 20 years later, not even in some cases 5, we can post this much marijuana in our house freely on Instagram. What are your thoughts about that right now, and how can we look into the past?
That's a really, really important topic, and one that just reflecting my days back of being a criminal justice major, even examples of cocaine, not that by any means anyone should condone it, but you look at the guy who's getting arrested with a briefcase, let's just say, DeLorean is a good example, how much time he did versus a kid in the ghetto who got busted for a gram of coke. It's something that no matter what the drug is, it seems that there's a bias towards the actual individual versus the crime itself. So it's something that's been a serious topic in the U.S., specifically in California, because, places like the Bay Area have always prided themselves on diversity and multicultural environments. And it is a stigma that we're trying to get over because that's something that happened way back in the Nixon days, with the post-reefer madness. Again, marijuana is a slang term. A lot of us in the industry are kind of offended by the term. I always reference cannabis, and some people have to explain what that name is versus marijuana. But marijuana was a slanderous term that was used against a minority, and not just African American, but the Latino community as well. And so, again, it's educating people, but unfortunately it's still occurring. I will say there are some states and local counties that have special programs for minority groups to give them an opportunity and not penalize them for having a past record. Business is business, although, it might have been illegal for them at the time, but it doesn't mean that they should be cut off from any opportunities in the future. So it is something that is very much a hot topic. I don't think it's discussed enough. There should be equal opportunity for everyone in every state, in every country in this space. But that is a good example, you're right, of someone like Billy Cyrus, because what was the feedback and response to the community with that versus Snoop Dogg doing the same thing as an example, So I think there's a lot of those stereotypes and stigmas we still have to battle through as well. And I oftentimes thank and blame Hollywood for that, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, a point as well. Do you foresee the U.S. government at some point doing pardons to those with very minor criminal offenses for, say, trafficking or possession? But I mean, like trafficking, like 8 grams. Like do you foresee the government at some point doing something for those incarcerated?
Yeah. Thankfully, it's happening already. It's happened in several. It hasn't happened statewide, but it happened in several counties. Los Angeles, San Francisco being a few. It's happened back east in Massachusetts, I believe in New Jersey as well. So the states are coming around. To your point, Todd, I really do hope at some point that the federal government gets behind it. But as you know, a better part of our prison systems are privatized. So it, like many things, is a business. And quite honestly, off the record, talking to friends who did continue to pursue a career in criminology, that it worked for, say, California Men's Colony, it comes up often where they say, I rather deal with these guys behind bars than a bunch of killers. And it's like, well, that's fine, but that doesn't mean it's a just cause. I mean, if it's less than an ounce, I totally condone these people getting pardoned, as it should be. Now, if you're talking about pounds and kilos, yeah, that's another thing. That's someone who is blatantly breaking the law and with intent to distribute, which brings a whole different dynamic to the crime itself. That should be handled, I think, in a different manner. But these people who 2, 3, 8, 16 grams, 20 grams, I mean, come on. That's enough for personal consumption or for you and a friend kind of scenario,
Couldn't agree more. I noticed this may be a little more lighthearted and fun story, but also with the sort of Hollywood and celeb scene. The Oscars have a gift bag every year. The Oscars gift bag's often a joke in terms of what Oscar winners will get, meaning $135,000 worth of different goods and services. And people are always like, why are you donating that money? But, one cool thing, part of this basket this year, and I don't know if you saw the news, is cannabis. So they are doing part. I'm just trying to find the article here. I had it up a second ago. Yeah, at the Oscars this year, there will be 25 gift bags, and they will contain cannabis truffles from a company out there. I found that kind of interesting. I know it's legal in your state, but not legal everywhere. But the Oscars being on such a main stage, that they would sort of be, for lack of a better word, ballsy enough to do that.
Yeah, I think they're trying to be edgy. Oscars anymore, and same with the Academy, they're trying to conform to the younger generation. More than 50% of cannabis consumers in the U.S. Are under age 35, of legal age, but under age 35. So I think that they want to elude the fact that they are a bit hip and they recognize the sign of the times. And to your point, Todd, I mean, Prop P in 1990, Prop 215 in 1996, and then now Prop 64 for full legalization for adults age 21 and over in the state of California as of 2016. It's legal. If you're here and you're 21 or over, you can consume and contain in your persons up to an ounce. So I think it's very cool that they're doing that. We have a friend, Susan Soares. She does events out around Coachella. She always does kind of this green room house for all the musicians to come over, and we participated in her event last year. We're going to participate again this year. She does the same thing. She gets cannabis-conscious acts who want to be around it and experience what the industry has to offer at their fingertips. So she does this private mansion and brings all the latest acts and groups through, and they all get to see what the newest tinctures and topicals and vapes are out there. And I think it's cool. I mean, it's all about education. It's
sounds
no
like a tough gig there,
awesome.
Lance. That one sounds like a tough gig.
As I say, you're always welcome, Todd.
Oh, well, I missed you on the last trip out west. Real quick, too, while we're on it, why not? Let's get Lance Lambert's prediction for best film at the Oscars happening on Sunday while we're talking about Oscar baskets.
Oh, my gosh.
What do you got? Green Book, Vice, A Star is Born, Roma, Black Panther, Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody. You got one? I
do. And although I love the barriers that Black Panther broke, and that's really next level. Again, that's the kind of stuff you'd expect in the 21st century. But I have to tell you, Rhapsody, man, the Bohemian Rhapsody, I watched both the documentary from the news reporter that was following them during the U.S. tour back in '77. So I watched the true live footage and the story from that perspective. And then I watched Bohemian Rhapsody, and both were interpretations. Both, were, I think, a little evasive from the true full story, but it was such a story. I mean, that movie, my gosh, Queen was so much bigger than anyone really recognizes or realizes, especially, again, with the younger generation. So I think it was phenomenal. They put that story out, albeit decades after, unfortunately, we lost Freddie Mercury, in 92. But still, I think that is a phenomenal movie and a great story that got told, finally, to the masses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, dude. I'm sort of, I haven't seen Black Klansman yet, but I've heard great things. I sort of think that might be it based on not seeing it, and I'm going to see it before it. And but Bohemian Rhapsody is a movie that, as everyone knows, I've talked about on this program in weeks in great deal. So inspirational, so brilliantly done. That Rami Malek performance is off the charts, insane. And have fun watching it, man. Lance, I appreciate it. This is a great catch up. I think this might have been our most informative one yet.
I think so too. And you, man, you did some homework. Props.
I came prepped today. I was on it, bud.
You're all over it, my man. It's always a pleasure.
Well, much love for being able to answer all these with such ease and knowledge. Lance Lambert, we'll talk to you next week. Appreciate your time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Todd.
Cheers.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.